Hello friends, and welcome to another Zen and the Art of Miniature Painting video. It's David here. It's been a very busy 5 to 6 weeks for me, so hence the lack of updates. So what I thought I'd do is do a kind of mega update video. So this is going to be a little bit of a long one. I think some folks will like that because they can just sit and paint along. Others will no doubt lament the fact that this is a long video. And my suggestion is perhaps watching this in segments if you don't want to sit down and watch it in one go. It's entirely up to you. You do things your way. So what I'll do is I'll try to provide a set of chapters so you can follow along if you feel like watching this in pieces. So as I say, it's been an absolutely mammoth month for me. It's just been busy from one end to the other. At one point, I think this is the first week that I've been at home consistently, and so as you can imagine, it's been quite disruptive. So on the hobby front, I've been doing little odds and ends here and there, but it's not really been great progress. So there's a few points of admin I'd like to talk about at the front end first. I will be coming to the UK the weekend of Warfare, which I think is November the 11th or something like that. November the 14th maybe. Let me just double check the calendar quickly. But essentially I'm coming to November on my way to Greece. Yeah, it's November the 15th and 16th. So I'll land in in London in the morning on Saturday, and then as I did last year, I'll spend the Saturday at Warfare in Farnborough, which isn't too far from Heathrow, and the Sunday as well. I'm planning on spending both days at the show this year, and then on Monday my wife and I will fly onwards to Greece like we normally do. So that's kind of job number one. So if you are going to be at Warfare, please do say hello. I'll probably be wearing a Bucky's shirt again. It's got a big beaver on the front. You can't miss it. If I do that, people tend to recognize it because it's so ridiculously stupid as a shirt. So yeah, if you see a big giant fat guy rolling around in a Bucky's t-shirt that probably has a Texas location printed on it, then it'll be me. Feel free to say hello. Always fun to see people. I know a few folks are going to be there. I know Von Ketteringham has announced publicly that he'll be at Warfare. There's a few other folks that I know that privately have told me that they'll be there as well. I won't divulge that here because, again, privacy and all that. I'm sure if they wanted everyone to know, they would tell them. So that's the Warfare side of the show. And then after that, we will be in Greece for about a week or so. Then we'll be back in the UK for a few weeks to spend time with my family. My dad, who's 75, is not doing so hot at the moment, so we'll spend some time with him and with my mom, who live in the UK, and then my youngest brother, who still lives there. We'll do a bit of traveling. I'll work from the UK for about a week or two, and then we will head back to the US. The fly in the ointment, so to speak, here is that we've decided this winter to because of the amount of travel we're doing, we're basically going to be gone for a month. We're actually relocating down to Texas for the duration of the winter, more or less. So we probably only return to Washington State in January time. I'm not a huge fan of the whole snowbird thing, and I actually quite like the miserable, cold, dark winters here, where it rains a lot. It reminds me of England. But I think from a sanity standpoint for Catherine, with work, I'm away from home a lot, and I tend to travel to places that are nice and warm and sunny and so on. So I don't really feel the misery of the long winter months, whereas she does. And Point Roberts is a very small town. It can be quite isolating. And so I thought, in fairness to her, and then also with in terms of getting assistance with the dogs while we're away, if we relocate to stay with family down in Texas, things should be a little bit easier for everyone. So that's a decision we've made. Now, obviously, that'll impact the hobby. My plan is to take down 15mm stuff and focus on painting that down there. I may take some World War II 28mm stuff, like a platoon or whatever, and make that my Christmas project to get that done. I think the challenge of travel and painting, which I've tried to do before, is that inevitably there are just certain things you cannot do. So for instance, like, it's not really worthwhile taking all your basing materials with you. So what you end up doing is painting a ton of figures, and then they just sit in a box until you finally get home and you're able to glue them to bases and so on. So we'll see how we deal with it this time round. It's just obviously not ideal. The other thing, of course, that I'm going to be focusing on while I'm down there is reading and such, research and all that stuff. And I've got a few things to show you today around that. So that's the kind of plan moving forward. If we look back in time a little bit, just a few bits and pieces to share with you. Like I said, I've been on the road a lot, and that started with a trip to Spain for about 10 days with work, and that was a very, very good trip, very interesting. I was able to take Catherine with me. That was fantastic. Her brother actually flew up to Washington State to come and look after the dogs for us, so that was an absolute joy. So we didn't have to worry about them so much, and Catherine was able to come along. She spent most of the time sightseeing. I spent most of the time at work, as you can imagine. It was pretty gruesome, actually, the work itself, just in terms of hours. But we got the job done, and then I ended up with about 2 days spare. So did a bit of sightseeing in Barcelona because we were in Catalonia, and also we drove up to Andorra. So you're probably looking at some footage now of Andorra. My advice is probably don't bother visiting. It's it's just a giant tax-free sky mall. There's nothing really to see there if you've got a day trip. It's really difficult to get to in terms of the drive is beautiful through the mountains, but then the traffic is just a nightmare, and it feels like every square inch of space that Andorra has been filled with more shopping space. So if you're into shopping, I suppose it's great. If you're not like me, then maybe a bit of a bummer, really. I was hoping for something a bit more kind of quaint and historical, but as it ended up, we had a really great lunch there, and then we drove back to Spain. But yeah, anyway, so that was our trip to Spain. We had a good time, and then after that, I've just been on the road a lot. Just with it's that time of year for me at work where everybody is, we're coming up to Christmas, so things start sort of on the one hand slowing down operationally. On the other hand, everybody's trying to plan for 2026. So we're all getting together in workshops to figure out what we're going to do next year, how we're going to do it, and how we can kind of get ahead of the game using the Christmas period to sort of supercharge things. So it's just one of those scenarios where I'm home on the weekends essentially and away most of the time. And of course, with that, when you're traveling and you're going between climates, your body doesn't really adjust. So it's really cold here at the moment, cold and damp. It's been unseasonably cold, actually. It's been really, really cold, bitter, actually. But if I then get on a plane and fly to, I don't know, Nashville, Tennessee or Texas or something, and it's suddenly 40 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, like, your body just does not like that, right? So you end up getting sick. You're on a plane with a bunch of other people who are sick, so you just end up getting sick, and it's pretty miserable. So one of the sort of downsides, I suppose, of being on the road so much is that you generally, when you do get home, you've got to catch up on your chores, you've got to prepare for things, prepare for winter, get all that done. And then you just don't have any energy because the time zone shifts doesn't help either. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but honestly, like, I would rather have a 24-hour time shift or 12-hour time zone shift. Like, if I get on a plane and fly to the UK, and that's like a 9-hour time shift or something, if I do that, I actually feel better than if I have like a 1 or a 2-hour time shift when I fly domestically in the US. The funny thing about that is that, like, the small time shift is really annoying because, like, if you wake up at if you need to wake up at 7, for example, right, that's your 5 a.m. That unless that's the time you normally wake up, it can be quite miserable. So it's just one of those things where the small shift is actually more like disruptive to me than the more like hard break with your time zone. So maybe that's just a personal preference. But anyway, enough about that. So the other thing that I did manage to do while I was on the road, I just want to quickly mention, I was in the Midwest, and I recalled, based upon conversations that have been had on live streams, that Corvinus Wargaming is based out there. So I contacted him and I asked him, I said, hey, where are you? He told me where he was geographically, and I had a trip that was about an hour or so, 2 hours away from there. So I made it so that I could fly into his city where he lives, and I was absolutely just delighted to be able to have dinner with him in his home city, or where he's based at the moment anyway, not his home city necessarily. And so I was able to have dinner with Corvinus Wargaming, Sam from Corvinus Wargaming. It was an absolute joy for me. I just wanted to thank him publicly and just say it was an absolute brilliant evening for me. It kind of made that trip worthwhile. As I said, travel isn't always as much fun as we think it is, but certainly getting to meet up with you and spend an evening picking your brain and just getting to learn more about, who you are and of all the things that you know, and just kind of being able to ask questions and stuff that YouTube doesn't necessarily lead itself to was fantastic. So I just wanted to thank him for making time for me. It was very last minute. I was supposed to be in Virginia that week, and then things shifted with work and we got rerouted. So I was able to make it happen, or was able to get to where he was, and he was able to meet me on a timeline that was pretty tight. So just again, a big thank you to Sam. Again, one of the best channels on YouTube, especially if you're into anything like Near or Middle Eastern, do go and give him a watch. He's an absolute expert on all things Ottoman, Safavid, Persian, Khorasani, whatever. So just a big thank you to him for making time. Okay, so just if we look at the shape of things to come, we're about 10 minutes in now, and we haven't actually started showing much in terms of figures and stuff. So there's a few sort of chapters I think that I want to discuss, so I'll give you a kind of preview. First thing I want to talk about is tariffs and how they've affected the wargaming hobby here in the US. For those who are interested, for those who are less interested, whatever, you can skip the section. But I'm just going to give you some thoughts on how that's actually worked out for me. And then as part of that, we'll look at some of an order of stuff that I literally just got. I said literally just got, that I got a few weeks ago. And then I want to show off some of the stuff that I've painted that's not based yet, just to show you kind of what happens when one travels and one doesn't have time to sit and base things. And then we'll have a look at what's on the painting desk. I don't always like doing that, but I just, specifically because this is a long video and there's going to be a bit of a pause for a time on some of this, I just wanted to do like a little, sit rep type thing to show you what's going on here. And then also some tips on assembly, specifically around my Caesarean Roman project, which unfortunately is now going to stall based on this travel, but there it is. And then I wanted to talk about some of the stuff that I've been painting, so I'll show you the finished stuff, and then we'll probably have a look at a magazine just to continue that fun little sort of excursion. I've got one of those old magazines again for you, so we'll have a quick look at that together. So here we go. Let's start off by having a look at some of the stuff that I purchased from the Perrys. Okay, so we'll start off by looking at the Perry stuff, and this is my portion of the order. So I wanted to talk about tariffs quickly as well, as part of this discussion. But essentially what happened was a friend of mine who I game with wanted to put in a Perry order. Well, what normally happens is when I decide to put in an order from abroad, I look for what the free postage threshold is, right? And then what I do is I put out a call to my many friends here who are wargamers, and I ask them and say, hey, does anybody want anything from Perry or Foundry or whatever? And usually I get a few bites, right? So I put out a call for Perry, saying to the guys, like, does anybody want anything? If you do, give me a list, kind of thing. And so a friend of mine was in Austria at the time on holiday, but he lives here in North America. And he said, oh yeah, brilliant. Actually, I want these packs. Could you get them for me? And I'll pay you back, kind of thing. So I was like, sweet, no worries. Let's get that done. So I was putting together the order. It was around the time of my wedding anniversary. And the reason that I was going to put the Perry order in was these two books here. So you can see there's beautiful volumes. Cape Warriors Volume 1, Frontier Warfare and Fighting Men in Colonial South Africa, 1834 to 1853. And then Cape Warriors Volume 2, British Battles in Colonial South Africa, 1834 to 1853, both by Colonel Mike Snook. So, I've been wanting these books for absolute years. Like, just they have been on my list of things, and the older I get, the more cynical I become, I guess, or more paranoid, perhaps is the right word. And I have this horrid fear that the day will come when I want to finally order the thing and it won't be available anymore. I like to call this the Ralph Astley effect. So what I've now done is I've just decided that, like, when things like this come up, there's no better time than the present. And the real kicker for me was that I've got a few of these figures that I'd picked up before, some Perry and Empress figures for the Cape Wars, that I had started, and then I kind of stalled on because one of the things that I was having issues with was finding a good uniform guides, good plates. There is an Osprey that covers it, but it's very, very cursory in terms of its treatment of, like, the Xhosa and the sort of Cape mounted rifles and so on. So I decided that what I wanted to do was get some proper books on it. And I know that in the past I've said that I prefer to get books in the library if possible. With volumes like this, you're not unlikely to find them in a library anywhere, even with interlibrary loans. So I thought, you know what, just go for it. So the books are, so we'll start with the books, and then I'll tell you all about the tariff nonsense. So the books are beautifully printed, high quality paper, printed in the UK. Lots of lovely plates, great history, which of course I love. But look at these drawings. Now these look to me like Perry drawings, Alan Perry drawings, because I recognize them. There's an old Warhammer Ancient Battles supplement, I think, for the late Romans that has drawings similar to this, which are by Alan Perry. And I think the little monograph there is AP, so that tells me it's probably Alan. But anyway, these are lovely, lovely drawings, and there's lots of great detail here. Some stuff from the original, more paintings and stuff from the period, some lovely local drawings and so on. Yeah, look at Fort Beaufort, eh? Look at the way that the country's gone to hell. It's just everything's dilapidated now. That's my country right there, everybody. Anyway. So yeah, lovely book. It covers pretty much everything you need for the period from all sides. So lots of great plates, again, Alan Perry plates, which is really going to be helpful when it comes to painting things. And then of course there's a battle book as well. So I don't know. I think what I'll do is, I've not read these cover to cover yet. When I have done that, I think I might do like a review, but we'll see how we go. So those were the books which I wanted, and Catherine had said she would get them for our anniversary as a gift for me. She's a keen supporter of my wargaming hobby. And then, of course, what then happened was we needed to get the number up to £250 for the free postage, so we had to throw in a few figures there just to help get it over the line. So what I'll do is I'll unpack this, and while I'm doing that, I'll waffle on and tell you some other stuff. So tariffs. Okay, so for those of you who are subscribed to the mailing lists for various wargaming companies, you will have noticed recently a flurry of noise around tariffs and all that jazz. Now, obviously, this doesn't help because the situation has been changing moment after moment here in the United States in terms of, which countries are subject to tariffs. There was no real plan on how the tariffs would be levied either. So I think what they were trying to avoid was a situation like the UK, where when you order stuff from abroad, Royal Mail holds onto it until you basically pay them off, and then you get your thing released. It seems they wanted to levy it on the shipping side. So it started with a message that I saw from Pendragon saying, hey, by the way, we are suspending sales to the US on the basis that we don't know, we've got no mechanism right now to send you stuff after a certain date. So, we're just going to stop selling stuff to the US for a while until we get further guidance from, the powers that be that'll tell us, okay, this is what you can and can't do. This is what tariff shipping looks like. And so, obviously, a little bit annoying because I think it was the day that I was putting the order together for the Perrys. I was literally I was back and forth with my mate Malcolm, and I was like, okay, mate, I'm putting the order in today, no problems, double checking, final check, making sure everyone's good and we're getting exactly what we want. And then a message came through from the Perrys, because at this point I had the Pendragon one, and I knew it won't be long and there'll be one of these for the Perrys behind it. And so there it came. There was the message: "Hey, we've suspended sales to the US until we've got a mechanism to basically be in compliance." So that was rather irritating, as you can imagine. Not great. So the that paused the purchase for a while, and it wasn't just the Perrys. I mean, it was basically everyone. What had happened is the tariffs had been put in place, but there was no mechanism. So Royal Mail were like being told, well, you have to levy it, but there was no system for them to do that. Nobody knew what that would look like. It was just abject confusion, and I think this is one of the issues with a lot of the tariff things. Is it's I will just say personally, I don't have an aversion to paying the tariffs themselves, and I'll explain why in a moment. But the thing that bothers me about it is just the lack of care that's gone into the process, which is that decisions are being made with no forethought as to like practically how they'll be actioned, right? So it just creates a bunch of confusion, and it's not great, right? As a I can only imagine if I were a distributor or a company selling things to the US, it would be the height of frustration that, like, you know, my livelihood is jeopardized by the fact that I'm being told I need to comply with a set of rules that aren't clearly spelled out. So that I understand that, right? I get it. I also understand the fact that, like, this is a new world. They've got rid of the de minibus, the exceptions for the $800 exception, which really was more to close a loophole with China than anything else. But they've gotten rid of that loophole, which is typically how I used to import stuff from the UK. Because when you order stuff from a wargaming company, you know, you're ordering a few $100s worth. You're not ordering thousands of dollars worth as a private individual. So anyway, there was this noise around tariffs, and it was unclear what was going to happen. It didn't take too long, and everybody had kind of, Royal Mail had come up with a solution, which was basically you pay a 10% flat rate on top of whatever you purchase, including the postage cost, by the way. And then the Perrys in particular said, okay, what we'll do is we will charge the 10%. Essentially, we'll levy that tax on you, and then we'll charge you a 50p. There's like a handling fee as well, just to deal with the admin side of things. I don't know how that's working out for them as a mechanism. I'll have a word with Empress Miniatures when I'm at Warfare. Hopefully they can give me a little bit of insight into their experience with it. But anyway, so the disaster passed. We were able to get our stuff, and then as per usual, it shipped in record time, got here really quickly. Happy bunny, got exactly what I wanted. Can't complain, right? So you can see here some of the figures, and I'll go over what they are in a moment. So my thoughts on tariffs specifically is when you buy, 6 months ago, if you bought things from the UK to the US, right? So in other words, if I bought Foundry stuff, or if I bought Perry figures or something like that, I got a really, really good deal, right? Same with Pendraken, most wargaming companies. And the reason was that if I buy from the UK, I do not pay VAT on figures. I don't on books either, by the way. But if I bought these figures, I would have not paid VAT, which means I automatically get a 20% discount, right? And then I would have got, and then obviously I just pay the flat rate of the figures and plus any postage. And of course, as I mentioned, the general plan is if you order enough, you don't pay the postage rate. So, you make your bulk order, and basically you can avoid paying 20% sales tax, which is what VAT is. So this is a fantastic deal, right? That means that everything I purchased from the UK always came with a 20% discount off the list price, and I wasn't paying an import tax on it at all, so I was just getting a 20% discount. So when you say things like, okay, well, I now have to buy 200 quid's worth of figures or something like that, actually, a portion of that is essentially free. I get more money, more figures for my money. That has now been taken away. And just for context, in the US, if you've never been here before, it can be really frustrating when you first get here. You'll see the price of something listed, and it'll be like $10, right? But the part they don't tell you, generally, is that your taxes are levied at the point of sale. So the price that you see is the pre-tax price. You get your when you get to the register, you scan the thing or whatever, and then it'll add the taxes. The way that the US is structured with a federal system and so on is that you can have taxes at multiple levels. So you can have a state sales tax, which I have here in Washington. You can have a city sales tax. You can also have a county sales tax, right? Depending on where you live and so on. So generally, if you're in an unincorporated portion of an area, of a county, you pay a county tax. If you're in a city, you might pay a municipal city tax instead of a county tax. That kind of idea. Now, taxes in the US are much lower than they are in the UK. They're typically around 7-ish% in all the areas I've lived, right? Maybe a little bit higher, maybe 8-9%, but they're never 20%. So let's say 10% is a nice flat rate, around about there. Well, all that the tariffs really represent is the fact that now for the first time I pay sales tax on stuff I'm ordering from abroad. So I pay a 10% rate, which is roughly in line with sales tax here. And so nothing's really changed for me. If I had gone to a shop in the US, I would be paying these taxes anyway. So that's why I say the tariffs don't really affect me all that much. And again, these are toy soldiers. They're a luxury to me. They're not essential. So therefore, I don't feel particularly hard done by. So as much as things change, they kind of stay the same, right? That's the long and short of it. So I would just say some folks get kind of butthurt about it. And obviously, change is always scary and people don't like it. But I also think that there's a degree to which we should just kind of accept that. We had a pretty sweet deal, and the loophole, basically, which is what it was, has now been closed. And, governments like levying their taxes. They're going to get their cut somehow, and now they're getting their cut in the form of tariffs. So that's where we are today. It's not a big deal, as I say. 10% is very reasonable, I think. It's more or less in line with the sales tax that I pay here locally. So I'm not too upset about that. Again, your mileage may vary. I can only speak for myself. I think the mechanism that they've used to levy the tariffs is far more elegant than the one that exists in the UK. I do remember when I lived in the UK, one of the nightmare scenarios was always having to buy stuff from the States or whatever, and then it turns up and you get this nasty little letter from Royal Mail saying, hey, we've held on to your item. You won't get it until you come down and pay your money. And once we've shaken you down and the pennies fall out of your pockets, then you can have your thing, which is massively annoying because, again, it's just an additional admin burden that you have to deal with. You'd obviously have to get to the post office itself and walk there or pay it online. I don't remember how it was, but this is probably 20 years ago, so don't take my word for it. So there we go. That's the situation with tariffs. So what I did is I ordered the stuff I wanted, paid 10% plus 50p, and got what I wanted in the end anyway. So I'm pretty happy on that front. Got what I wanted, job done. So here's some of the figures that I ordered. I've gone for Cape stuff. So Catherine's only stipulation was that she got to pick the packs, and so we picked together. We picked bits and pieces. I have a very small Cape War collection at the moment, which is made up partially of Perry figures and partially of Empress figures. I really like Empress. I think their proportions are just fantastic. So are Perry's actually, but they're a slightly slimmer figure. And I really like the kind of their Xhosa figures. I think they are just absolutely brilliant. But I got, I'll just go over what I've got in a minute, but as I'm unpacking them here. But basically, Catherine just wanted to make sure that I got stuff that she had signed off on, right? So, so with the book bundle, you get a free figure, and it is this one here, which is I forget the guy's name, but it's a famous person. Let me just zoom in for a tad. Let me do that, and then pull a bit of focus there. So I got this figure, which would be cool. So he will do duty where he's required. And then the other piece that I've not really thought too much about, I'm going to base these figures for Death in the Dark Continent, which means they're going to be on 60mm wide bases. But I am going to probably use, because Death in the Dark Continent isn't really designed for these earlier conflicts, so what I'll probably end up doing is using Sharp Practice. Now, oh no, not Sharp Practice, I hear some people say. What I will say is for conflicts like this, which are sort of very small wars, right, where you maybe have a company against, a sort of native force, which is irregular by its nature. It actually works quite well. You don't run into that kind of fallacy where you're saying this is a division and it's a battalion of 8 blokes who just happen to have some old guard grenadiers knocking around and a squadron of dragoons just in the neighborhood with a cannon. In this case, it actually these are sort of relatively combined force operations. So you'd have, based on my reading for the Cape Wars from some of the first-hand sources, you would have like a few companies of British troops. They might have a small mountain gun or an artillery piece with them for their final assault on the mountain fastness of whoever they're attacking. And then there'd be a few hangers-on, like Cape Mounted Rifles would provide some kind of cavalry force, but it's generally speaking more of a sort of mounted infantry component than a sort of dashing lancers cavalry force, if you want to put it in those terms. So a little bit different from, I suppose, what you would see with Napoleonic sharp practice. So sharp practice in my head actually works quite well. The emphasis on personalities is probably also quite appropriate for this war, given that the scale of it is so much smaller, right? Again, we're not dealing with Waterloos and Hougoumont and so on. We're dealing with guys in the bush fighting each other. So it's certainly doable with sharp practice. Now, sharp practice is typically figures are mounted individually. I just don't care for that. I prefer having my figures multi-based. It's just a personal preference at this point. I used to be all about the individual basing, but as I've gotten older, I've just sort of developed a habit for multi-basing. So I'll do the basing in the Death in the Dark Continent style. There is a sort of rule set adjustment for Death in the Dark Continent for the Cape War itself. I have got it. I just haven't fully read it yet because it doesn't really matter. I've got no forces to play with, so there's no point reading rules about it at this point. All right, so those are my thoughts on the rules and so on, and the figures that I'll be using for the Cape Wars. So I got a little smattering of bits and bobs, so I'll show you that off in a moment. But this is basically all the lead I got. As I said, the rest of the order was made up by my friend Malcolm, who ordered a absolute bucket load of Renaissance era stuff for his Italian Wars project. So, thanks to him for helping us get over that line. Otherwise, I would have had to spend more money. But this was a lovely gift from Catherine, and thank you so much for this. If you're watching, I doubt it, but if you are, thank you so much. So she had a hand in choice here. So, excuse me sniffing. Like I said, the weather's been pretty grim here. So that should be everything. Yeah, it is. Okay, so a little bit of everything. So as I mentioned in the past, I've actually purchased some stuff from the Perrys and from Empress. So I have some Xhosa warriors. I have some British. So what I did was I bought another pack of this here, which is CFB 2. This was to get my basic building blocks of units for the British are, I want them in units of 18. So the Perry packs come in 6s, so I'm going 6, 12, 18. Okay, and then the idea is that they will be based on 60mm wide bases, usually 30mm deep, but in some cases, and I'll explain that in a second, there may be a 60x60 base. So in the case of these infantry, for example, they will be on 60x30mm bases, so that I can shake them into like a kind of scattered skirmishy formation if I want to. So this is actually a duplicate pack, so let me zoom in. This is a duplicate pack of something that I already have. Let me just see if I can get the camera to show you the specific figures that we're looking at right now. So this is a duplicate pack that I already have, which is sort of firing, I think it's a 72nd Highlanders. There's only 2 codes for them. So there's this code and then there's the command code. So I just got another pack of the firing skirmishing types. They're really lovely figures. These guys, they were Highlanders, but they fought in trews, not in kilts. And they wear these I think they're called kilmanoks. I'm not sure. I don't think it's a kilmanok. But it's like a little hat with a tuft on top and a band. And the band is checkered or diced rather, which is going to be an interesting painting challenge. And then I also got the the command pack, which is just north of there. So let me just get the camera shunted over there. I can show you more close detail. I also got the command pack there. Now this is where I say the 60x60 bases might be helpful. So it's got a pack horse with sort of attendants, and there's a achterrijder here. I don't know what you call it in English. Like a local, not servant. Maybe servant is the right word, but basically a native servant who handles it, and then there's an officer there. You can see very dynamic figures. Perrys do a fantastic job. I am partial to a Perry figure. So that would be the 72nd Highlanders done in terms of figure purchases. And then Catherine, as always, is mad keen for me to buy the more interesting packs. So as you can see there, you'll see this is a stretcher party. So this is not a 72nd Highlander specific one. This is just it's a similar headwear, but these are just guys in the sort of little forage caps. That's what the word is, forage caps. And so they carry a comrade on a stretcher, which is a really cool little vignette. So I thought that would be a nice little piece to add. And again, I'll put that on a 60x60 base most likely. And we can use it as an objective, or we can use it as a part of a unit, integrated as part of a unit, whatever. We have lots of options there. But I love this guy here, who's carrying his mate's kit. He's got like his knapsack, and he's got two muskets there, as you can see. And that reminds me of when I was in the army, and you would have to do Casevac drills, and you'd have to carry your mate's stuff. It was always a nightmare. We had this one Nigerian guy in our platoon. His name was Franklin. And he was like an absolute beast. He could carry so much stuff. So the rule was generally like we would carry the body and he would carry all the stuff, because he was just like a pack mule. The guy was a machine. I've never known anybody with that carrying capacity in my life. So he was a legend. He couldn't shoot, but he was fantastic when it came to carrying stuff. I think he went back to Nigeria. He lives in the Delta area. He's a very interesting chap. Anyway, so I got the stretcher party, and then for the Xhosa we got the command pack for that. So I forget the name of the chief right now. So when we paint it up, we'll talk more about that. But also got some kind of more like chief-like figures. So these heron feathers, it's a blue heron or grey heron, a blue heron I think, that the Xhosa like to shove into like a headband as part of their general look. But great looking figures. I mean, fantastic. One thing I appreciate is the fact that like not all these guys look like they've been pumping iron at the gym incessantly, right? Like they're not too hench. Sometimes when sculptors do like Zulus and Xhosas and stuff, they all look like Arnie fresh out of the gym when he was Mr. Olympia. One of the reasons I really like the Empress figures is they're actually a lot slighter. And I really like that kind of slight build versus this kind of more chunky hench dude build. Kind of Conan the Barbarian look. So I really appreciate the sculpting kind of style. The other part was that I got a unit of blokes with like assegai and shields, which are here. So this is a more early period for the Xhosa. The Xhosa took to the musket really well. So did the Sotho actually. The Zulus were the kind of holdouts. They stuck to the ikqa, the stabbing spear, and the shield more religiously, I suppose, because it had been so successful. But these other tribes, such as the Sotho, the Xhosa, the Tswana, the Basotho, they took to the musket with gusto. I think because it was a great equalizer with the Zulu, right? So I got those, and then I got a pack of musket armed blokes with blankets. I forget what the name is for this blanket. Oh man, I used to have one when I was in South Africa. There's a name for it. I forget what it is now, but anyway, it's a very typical piece of clothing, or like I say clothing, it's a type of blanket, a karots maybe, something with a K, anyway, the blanket the blanket is just kind of like guys would, that was their clothing basically. They didn't really wear many clothes, as you can imagine. So what they would do is the blanket would be like they would just sling it over their shoulder. Almost think of it like a poncho, except it doesn't have a hole in the top, and they would cut about with these blankets. So it's quite a sort of iconic piece of sort of equipment, or I guess not quite uniform, but you get the idea. But the figures again are really lovely sculpts. You can see this guy, for instance, is kneeling. He's got his musket, but he's also got a bundle of assegai throwing spears. There's a nice loading figure here, which is quite lovely. So we'll mix them in. I don't think we'll do like all blankets and all non-blankets together. We'll just mix them up and see how we get on. Those were the kosa, and then over here I also got some Fingoes or umfengu, which are, or amafengu actually. So these are tribes. They're not the kosa adjacent, but what they did was, these are tribes who were driven south by the Zulu and ended up settling in Xhosa lands, and were treated pretty much like slaves by the Xhosa, and as such they very quickly glommed onto the British as sort of protectors, right? And they became kind of like native auxiliaries with gusto. So what I've done here, or what we've got here, this is a great one. I like this one because it's let me see if I can just get it to draw a focus. There we go. He's got a little nightcap, like a sleeping cap type thing, the knapsack, and there's another fella here who's got a he's actually got a forage cap with a sort of rather handsome feather in it, which I like. So the Fingu are basically a conglomeration of tribes that were pushed south by the Zulu. So for those who don't know, when Shaka took over in Zululand, right, and he basically revolutionized Zulu society and war, it caused a thing called the mfekane, which is scattering, right? So this is the reason why in South Africa today you get people as far as like, Zimbabwe, who speak Zulu adjacent languages, like the Ndebele, who in Zimbabwe are called the Matabele. The Ndebele were originally part of a paramountcy under a guy called Mzilikazi, who was Shaka's mentor. When Shaka came to power and took over and became kind of the warlord of choice, these guys were basically had a choice. You either integrated and kind of bent the knee to Shaka and became part of the Zulu kingdom, or you had to leave, right? You just fled. And so it's almost like an effect where if you fire a pool ball, a cue ball into like a racked up, when you do the break in a game of pool, the balls will scatter in many directions. The same thing happened. So from the center of like contact in Zululand, there was this general push outwards, right? So the one thing is that like whenever you get a mountain range such as Swaziland or Lesotho, the Zulus were not particularly good at capturing those areas, so whoever was living in those mountain areas tended to hold it. So the Swazis, for example, who are actually related to the Zulus, both in language and also their royal house, they ended up staying put in what is now Eswatini, Swaziland, right? In a similar fashion, Lesotho, which is inhabited by the Basotho, was more or less unaffected because the Zulus didn't do particularly well getting over the mountains, the Drakensberg Mountains, which run kind of northeast to southwest, and really delineate the border between Zululand and the interior, the Highveld, right? So the Mfengu were pushed south, and they ended up landing in what is Transkei Ciskei area. The Xhosa region is more or less defined by a river called the Great Kei River, and that's where we get the name Ciskei and Transkei, which means this side of the K and that side of the K, in the same way that you get Cisalpine and Transalpine Gaul, right, in Europe. So it just means on this side and on the other side of the delineating feature. So in this case, it's the K River. So around the K River, the Xhosas dwelt, and these people moved into that area, and they got basically pushed. Like I said, they were bullied by the Xhosa because they were second-class citizens. and as such they became kind of like their I wouldn't say slaves, that's maybe too strong a word, but they certainly were second class. They were not treated particularly well. When the British set up the Fish River colony and expanded eastwards from the Western Cape, they came into contact with these Fingoes, similar with the Boer communities that settled in the area. And so they found ready employment there, but also it was definitely a step up from their perspective, right? Because it's like, yeah, you're a second-class citizen if you work for the white man, but you tend to do a little bit better monetarily and in terms of material wealth, right? So the Mfengu wear these cool little like white like shirts, and they have a lot of European kit. Now, they did also fight with some of their traditional weapons. So you can see this guy, for instance, has he has both a musket and he has an assegai with him. And so that they represent kind of like a Natal Native contingent style of troop. So I got one pack of those. We'll get those done up, and then obviously we'll bulk the numbers out as we need to. And then what the British would use them for primarily was these wars against the Xhosa were pretty horrendous. Like you would go into these thick bush areas, usually centered around a mountain somewhere, and you'd have to basically sweep through them to drive the Xhosa out. So it was almost like hunting, right? So the Fingoes were really good at the bushwhacking part. They would go in and basically try to flush out the Xhosa from the bushes, and the British would try to stick to the more open areas and fight them. But it was truly a pretty horrendous war. It almost has kind of like Vietnam qualities in some ways from the British perspective. Just a quick comment on the quality of the casts here. They're pretty clean, I'll say. One thing I am slightly concerned about is I've noticed an increasing instance of what I like to call noodle musket. So look at that. I mean, that is pretty horrendous, right? And there's quite a fair few of those, and bending the muskets back into shape is always a nightmare, so just be aware. So the other thing, of course, that we got, so that's enough about the Mfengu. The other thing we got was we got some Boers. So I think this is Andries Pretorius, both on foot and mounted, and then a more generic commando leader here with their horses, obviously. And so that's the Catherine assisted I get those to add to my Boer repertoire. As an Afrikaner, obviously that's part of my cultural heritage, so she's insistent that I have that, so thank you again. And then I got some more Boers. Now these Boere here there's a standing firing set and a more prone kind of kneeling set. I love prone figures. Nobody does enough prone figures. That's my number one thing. One thing about prone figures that's great is you don't have to paint the underside. Your painting area is much smaller. And then the other thing as well is it's just more realistic to my mind. Like if you're gonna use if you're gonna fire in the open, you need to be down, right? You don't want to be standing up. It's just you make yourself a bigger target. So these figures here are specifically for the more area of what we would call in Afrikaans a voorleier, so a front loader, like a musket, right? And so these guys, again, the Boers, their great advantage was mobility. So horses revolutionized the way that wars in southern Africa were fought. Hence the fact that basically all the native tribes, bar the Zulu, really took to the horse with gusto, because it just completely changed the way you could fight. But on top of that as well, of course, you have the musket, which is a great equalizer. But one thing we need to bear in mind in this period, in like the 1830s and 40s, is that these are still front-loading, muzzle-loading muskets, right? So they're not like the sort of devastating breech loaders that we think of when we think of like the Zulu War or that kind of thing. So this idea that the Boers were able to just kind of steamroll their way into like the Natal region, the Drakensberg, the inland, the Highveld, it's kind of a bit of a misnomer. There's a lot more going on historically there, but I know that one of the things, for instance, is that like a lot of land grants that happen in the Eastern Free State, the Eastern Transvaal, which borders Swaziland, were basically ratified under treaty with the Swazi king, and the Boers would typically serve as mercenaries in his wars against his native opponents. And so those treaties still exist today, right? So we have them written down, and the Swazi king has reaffirmed that they still stand from his perspective. So there's a lot going on there, but the idea that the Boers are this like unstoppable force, people think of them, I think, more in the Second World War mold, which is where they've got a Mauser, which is a magazine-fed breech bolt action rifle. Like, yes, sure, they were very good, and they were no doubt excellent shots, from a very early period because they were frontier people. But this idea that they are like these basically mobile machine guns doesn't track in this period, so they're a bit more fragile. So I've got the Boers, some Boer Command, some British, and some Xhosa and some Fingoes. So pretty well set up here. Got loads to get on with. So when I was talking about the trip to Texas and this kind of snowbird moment, part of that is wondering, like, what do I take with me? So on the one hand, I'm thinking take 15mm stuff because 15mm is more portable. I don't need a perfect setup for painting it. On the other hand, I could probably put a dent into this by taking this with me. The only challenge I find with 28mm is that, like, I tend to like more gradation in my painting, and so I tend to want a larger selection of paints, and I'm not prepared to take my entire paint collection with me to Texas. I'm just not going to do it. So I think the smart move here is to stick to the smaller scale stuff for the winter time, which kind of breaks my heart because I really like to get on with this, but there it is. But anyway, I've got a lot of reading to do around the Cape Wars, so I'm certainly not hard done by. So anyway, that's my little chat about Perry Order and the tariffs and how they've affected me and my thoughts on that. And now I think we will move on to the next thing. Okay, so let's have a quick look at what's on the painting table. I'm doing this just more or less as an opportunity to do a sort of timestamp as to where we are for the period for now, before I disappear for 2 months or so, 3 months basically. I might do videos while I'm in Texas. I haven't decided yet. We'll see how we get on when I'm there, and what I've got to show really, but expect things to be quiet at any rate. So a couple of things. One is I've got this little tub of figures here. You'll notice that it's just tissue paper, kitchen towel, and some loose figures in it. So normally I like to just kind of get the figures done, base them up, and then they're finished, right? But in some cases that's not always an option. And the reason for that is that I'm trying to be more careful about prematurely basing things. So those of you will know that when I did my first base of these Grenadier Guards for the Crimean War, I just went with 6 figures to a base, and then I changed my mind later and did 8. So now I've got to go back and tear up a base of figures and then, do that. So I've got 8 figures here of Grenadier Guards for the Crimea. They, to my eye, look quite nice. They didn't take too long to paint up. It's just really, really dull when you need to be in the right headspace to do red coats and highly uniformed troops, right? And as I say, with me being away as much as I have, I've not really sat down and done much painting recently, but I got these done, so I'm quite chuffed with them. I think once they're based up, they're going to look great. And then in here as well, there are those Bersaglieri that we saw a while back from the Old Glory figures. And then there's some Romans. So I wanted to quickly talk about the Romans. A couple of things is, these are test figures essentially. So what I've done is I have sort of changed the way I work slightly with these figures, and I wish I'd done it years ago. So my mate Dave is doing a similar project of Caesarean Romans. Let me drop the can. Actually, it's about right. I'll just move the figures to show. But he is doing his uniforms. Sorry, his army is going to be a lot more uniform than mine. Mine is designed to be kind of like a scrappy Civil War era army, or just to kind of reflect the more kind of ad hoc nature of Marian legions. So, what in my head, and again, this is interpretive, so don't if you want to fight with me in the comments, go ahead and do it, but I'm not going to die on this hill. In my head, the Republican period, the mid-Republican period, you're called up to serve. You bring your kit that you own, and of course your tax bracket basically determines your ability to arm and equip yourself and your role. You turn up, you fight, and then you go home. The kit's yours. It doesn't go to a central depot, from what I can gather. with the Caesarean period or the Marian period, there is an emphasis more on the idea that we just need warm bodies, and so we'll take what we can get, because the average citizen doesn't want to spend years and years and years on campaign for the empire far away from home. And it had a bad impact economically in that this is the period of when we see like rampant latifundia starting to emerge, which is that rich people are snapping up land at low cost because basically kind of yeoman farmers are going broke because they're spending all their years abroad. Family is going to ruin while they're gone, and they cannot, there's a large degree of urbanization. People become more dependent on the state, etc. So there's a lot of things happening socially at Rome. And one of the things that Marius does is he says, we don't need hastati, principes, triarii, and velites anymore. I just need legionaries. I need them to be able to do all the things they need to do, not just a subset based upon their tax bracket, basically. So he institutes this idea of the Marian Legion, and as part of that, we see a more kind of standardization of equipment across the board. So this is the period of Caesar, Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Magnus, and these guys are smashing around the Mediterranean. So what I've done here is you can see three different shield designs. Now, I also have a blue shield design, which I've shown before in the past. That is my Syrian Legion. So I've done them in slightly darker skin tones, and I've tried to make them look nice and bright and blue, as if they come from a slightly richer part of the empire. These are supposed to be slightly different legions. So the red one here, the red shield with the white tunic, is going to be a Gallic sort of veteran legion. So I've done like the laurels with the little Capricorn figure there from LBMS, and they've got the crests, so they kind of are slightly more. They've got the crests, sort of the horsehair plumes on their Montefortino helmets, so they look a bit more kind of pro, if you want to put it in those terms. Now, what I'll do, here's a work in progress figure for the same unit. Some of the guys will be in reds, and some of them will be in kind of more bleached whites. And the idea is that we'll show these guys off to be a bit more, together, and a bit more pro, and a bit more long serving. Now, what was I going to say? Yeah, so you can see here that I've started painting figures with the shields on. So in the past, what I would do is paint the entire figure, then I'd glue the shield on. No, then I'd apply the shield transfer, then I'd glue the shield on, and then they would be done. But it was very fiddly and really annoying, and I didn't enjoy it very much. So what I've done, and I got this top tip from my friend Dave, who's doing a similar army, is to actually put the shields on right at the front end. And I've done it using what my dad calls araldite. I think it's called epoxy. It's a two-part epoxy glue, basically, cement. You mix it up. It turns into like a grey resin, and the stuff is, again, as my dad would say, as hard as Satan's toenails. That's an Afrikaans saying. I don't know if it works in English, but you get the idea. So with my early Imperial Roman army, which I did 20 odd years ago, I used super glue, and the shields just keep popping off, and it's really frustrating. So moving forward, I'm going to glue the shields on early doors, and then I'm just going to paint around the fact that there's potentially a lump of araldite in there somewhere. You don't really see it, to be honest. Once the focus is always on the front of the figure and the shield, so you don't really notice it. So this is another test figure. Well, I say test figure, this is just a figure I grabbed and started doing, trying to figure out like how can I improve the process, and then so that's kind of like the veteran style figure. And then what I also wanted to do was I wanted to also do like a more kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, some more regular style raised units, and then some some kind of like more raw legions, right? So imagine kind of hastily raised legions that are perhaps not as well trained. So one of the things I've done is for this army versus, say, my early Imperial army, I've gone for more varied tunic colors. So as you can see here, we've got the blue wings, and then we've got a guy with a kind of linen-ish colored, or sort of yellowy linen colored, brown linen tunic. And then with the same shield design, a guy with a more kind of an ochre color. So the idea is that this would be a field legion that is raised by a general to fight in either the civil wars or in North Africa against the Numidians or wherever they need to be. But what I'll do is the tones here will be kind of browns and yellows on the tunic side of things, varying it up a little bit to create a kind of slightly more irregular look. Unity in the shields, which is probably, it's highly unlikely, but it's a way of uniting the unit from a wargaming perspective. But the tunics allow me to give it a little bit of like a slightly more irregular look to set it apart from my early Imperial type army, which is a bit more centrally supplied, I would suggest. My thought is that in the Marian period, you're typically getting equipment from wherever you can. In the Imperial period, likely legions are being supplied centrally, at least for the legion. I don't mean from Rome or from Italy necessarily, but the legion is more likely to be outfitted in a common style. And that's also likely not true based upon excavations at Hadrian's Wall and so on. But from an aesthetic perspective, I wanted to be able to draw a distinction between the armies, right, just visually. And then this is going to be my the basis for my more what's the word I'm looking for? My more raw, hastily raised legions. So green tunics, pale greenish kind of like linen colors, and then these green laurels, just to kind of make them look slightly different. I'm varying the tones of skin highly amongst my Romans. These Marian ones in particular. My early Imperial army was very sort of generic. Everyone looks the same. With this army, I really wanted to go out and kind of make it more interesting visually, give it a sort of more pan-Empire, pan-Imperial, pan-Mediterranean look. And so as part of that, I thought I'd do varied skin tones. This is so most of the raw legionaries, the two that you've seen there, have got chainmail on, and they'll probably be front rankers, more kind of like, guys who've probably got some experience, but are not like, they lead this newly raised legion. The bulk of the newly raised legions, however, will look like this. In other words, I'll just give you an example to compare against. We can actually, hang on, I'll use a doweled figure because they're the same, basically. One of the things with the figures with the chainmail is they have this lovely bronze scaled belt, and they've got all the kit. They've got the little dagger that you can see there, which this raw unit does not have. So he has the gladius, yes, but he does not have the dagger, and he does not have the really fancy nice belt. He's just got a leather belt. And then of course he's just wearing a tunic, he's not wearing chainmail. So what I'm going to do with these guys is use them as kind of like raw legions that have freshly been raised. So maybe from gameplay terms they could be slightly lower morale rating or something like that. But the idea is that during Civil War periods in particular, you would have these hastily raised legions that would be sent to go and fight, and they didn't always do a particularly great job. And I want to be able to show that visually. So the other option with this design here is that like they could also stand in as kind of imitation legionaries for like Numidian armies, that kind of thing. Although I'd rather just do them separately personally, but for the time being. So raw legions, color wise, again, I'm going for the more white, I say white, I mean more plain unbleached linens, kind of a slightly brown gray tinge to it. I want it to look kind of not too bright and shiny. I want it to have a little bit of a dulled effect, like an off-white. So I'm just trying to kind of make things kind of interesting. Once I've nailed down my recipes, what I'll do is I'll start doing them in groups, in batches, right? So I'll do like, say 4 or 5 or 6 legionaries with the same tunic color and everything, varying the skin tones. And then what I'll do is once I've painted up like say 24 or whatever, I can base them up into blocks of 8, but I can like position them in ways that kind of reinforces the irregular look. Do you get the idea? That's the kind of the vision I'm going for with my Marian army. You can see here I've painted the white parts, and my goal is to get the shield transfers on early rather than late. I don't want to faff around with that as the kind of final thing. I find it tedious and quite time consuming to do that work, so I think rather than doing it all in one big go at the end, I'd rather just get it done as I roll along. Okay, other things on the painting table for now. There's obviously, I'll just show you at the back there, there's always some Crimean stuff. So these are the last of the Grenadier Guards. They're lurking in the back there. I'm cracking on with those. I've got the command figures to do separately. I won't worry about them right now. Let's just get the rank and file done. And again, the Crimean stuff is perhaps worth taking with me to Texas because it's very uniform in that regard. So I might take some of that with me. We'll see how I feel. And then here we've got a couple of Pechnegs horse archers. So I've had these figures for, I don't know, I got them from First Call probably in it's about 2002, 2003, 4 period. So I've had them for about 20 years. Great figures. The Pechnegs or Patzinaks were a horse people who lived kind of north of the Crimea. And what I wanted with these guys, originally they were purchased to act as like mercenaries and auxiliaries in like Byzantine armies, to fight Byzantine armies, to be used for whatever, But you can never have enough horse archers, as Corvinus Wargaming always points out to us. Like there's a long and rich history of men on horses with bows from the steppe who make their living fighting in wars. So what I did was I did some research on the Pechnegs. They're pretty difficult to get hold of proper. I think I need to find some actual books about them rather than relying on ospreys, but I'll do some of that digging while I'm away from home. But what I thought I would do for these figures was focus on a couple of things. So the horses are not done yet, so if ignore the horses for now. The riders, I tried to kind of get a more Turkic skin tone going. So I've tried to sort of make them look a little bit more interesting looking skin-wise there. So I've used a bit of dark skin tone with sunny skin tone to just try to kind of give them a slightly different look from the rest of my blokes who are more kind of Mediterranean looking. The kaftans that they wear, I think it's a kaftan because it's kind of like ankle length, so I'm going to call it a kaftan. I've tried to give them a kind of sheen. Okay, so I don't know how real this is, but I want them to look very richly adorned. So all the plates I've seen for the Pechnegs seem to be like that they wear like almost like a silk and shiny cloth that's heavily embroidered with patterns and such. So I'm not going to be able to paint that on in detail. So what I did, and I'll use this example here, is I chose a color that's like kind of like almost like a cerulean blue-green, and then I've done some really extreme highlights to kind of give it a shine. I think that's worked out well. And then I've used for the caps, I've copied a manuscript detail it's a Byzantine manuscript, but it's in Spain somewhere. Reds and yellows seem to be pretty popular for the hats, and then I've just done the quiver with some detail on it there. And then this thing, which I think is a bow case, I wasn't quite sure what it was initially, and then I did some looking, and it looks like it's a bow case. So what I need to do is, let me get a pointing thing. I'll just use the sculpting tool. This bit here needs to be kind of dark, so it needs to be like a black kind of thing to show like a cavity, right? And then this is just a bow case. So this one's going to be yellow, and I'll just do a little bit of a detail on there to try to make it look interesting. But yeah, you can never have enough horse archers. So I have these guys on the shelf here. You've seen my vast colossal shelves worth of unpainted figures, and so I thought, sometimes when you're in the mood for doing something a little bit different, just grab something off the shelf and smash it out. And so I've just done these two. Like I mentioned, when I've been on the road a lot and I get home, I don't always want to do something that's going to take hours and hours and hours. I may just want to sit here, listen to a video or a podcast or something, and just get a little bit of painting done that's relatively low stakes. And this is kind of one of those things that I did. So I've done these two figures. I did the guy in the kind of cerulean green, and I've done a guy in a kind of more bluey kind of color with the yellow, which I think looks quite nice. The horses aren't done yet. I'll probably stick with the grey and the brown as they are, but I'll just add in extra details around them. But the main emphasis here was to try to figure out how to do the kaftans, which I'm quite happy with. Again, if there's any experts on horse people, for want of a better term, or Pechnegs in particular, please do chime in. You know who you are, if you have any ideas or any suggestions. But my vision is that, like, once they're painted up, you're not really going to be able to tell them apart from any other horse people. So they just think of them as like Silk Road rich blokes who live off plunder. That's kind of really the main effort there. Great figures from First Call, very limited range though, so there's not a lot to purchase from them there. So I bought the pack a long time ago, and I just thought I'd get it done. I also wanted to quickly just do a little bit of a highlight on some late Roman stuff. So I think a while back I showed off a late Roman archer. I don't remember if I did or not. May have, may not have. Can't remember. But what I've done here is these are some figures that that I painted 20 odd years ago. These are Peri sculpts from Foundry, late Romans. They were done a very long time ago, but they've subsequently been chipped to hell. So their noses and all the raised edges are chipped off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to base them up, finish them up, and get them done. They're basically over the line. Let's get them done. Then they're finished. And what I needed for this pair of skirmishing archers is just another bloke. So I started doing him as well. And I've tried to mimic the colors. So this yellow is actually a ochre triad from Foundry. That's why it looks so orangey on the left. That's the base color. So we'll work that up. And again, this is just part of that effort of I look around at the shelf, I see what's kind of done, sort of done, almost finished. What can I finish up, get it varnished, get it done in the cabinet, and you never have to touch it again except for to play with. And that was one of those. Then I went on a bit of a binge with Numidians a while back. You'll remember when I purchased these figures. These are Renegade Numidian archers. They are quite lovely, although they all have the Rick James hair. I read a bunch of books recently on Numidians. They were all Osprey books, so for what that's worth. But there were a few of them that were quite good. One thing that's kind of evident is there's very much a style that everyone seems to think the Numidians wore. The indication seems to be that they wore kind of like undyed, whitish kind of woolen tunic. I have some thoughts on that. The first thought is... Yep, absolutely. Probably in Numidia itself, they would have worn more or less unadorned natural tones. Probably helps with the landscape and so on as well. And then what's available there in terms of dyes and so on. But the other thing I thought about was the fact that like when these blokes are in like Italy serving Hannibal, or when they're in Roman armies serving in Dacia, or all over the Mediterranean, like in the East, fighting like Greek successor states, these clothing wears out. They're not going to get a tunic from home, right? So what I've done with my 15mm stuff, as you'll see, is I've kind of I've put a smattering of color in there, usually faded, to show that like these tunics are pretty hard wearing, but I just like to add a little bit of color and variation so that it doesn't look too monotonous. So what you'll see here with these 28mm figures, these are skirmishing archers. So in my head, they're not going to be as well paid perhaps as or as high profile rather. Let me just move the camera so it's more square so it's easy for me to show you. They're not going to be as well paid or as high profile as the horsemen, who are usually the rock stars of the Numidian army. So what I've done is everyone will end up with a white adjacent color. So the guy here, this is a raw linen triad from Foundry. This guy over here is I think it's an Arctic white triad from Foundry. So I'm just trying to give a slight shift in color so that yes, everything kind of ends up in a white-ish, linen-ish swatch, but at the same time it's kind of enough color shift to be irregular and interest evoking. So I want it to look like these are not centrally organized, centrally supplied armies, but rather that they are blokes who are wearing their civvies essentially. So here's, for instance, a brown that I'll work up to a very light pale brown that verging on a white, and then the same thing with skin tones. So I'll just shift us quickly back to looking in more detail there. You can see the skin tones. While I've gone for a kind of brown northern Mediterranean look, I've also tried to vary the skin tones just a little bit to give it a bit of interest, so it's not just, everyone doesn't look the same. Humans are not like that. So I've tried to create a little bit of visual interest around the Numidians, so it's not just a boring mob. And then the other thing that you can see here is some World War II, early war Germans. These are Crusader figures for the most part. There are maybe some, they're all Crusader figures for now. These are early war Germans. I have those long-suffering viewers will remember some battle report type videos that I did many years ago now for World War II, around Poland, 1939. I'm really interested in the early war period of World War II, so I've got these lovely collections, and I just wanted to add some options. My rule set of choice for World War II is Chain of Command. I really like the rule set. That's for the sort of more platoon level thing, and so I've got some options here. I've got a anti-tank rifle, 5cm mortar. I think 5cm or 2cm? No, it's 5cm mortar. This will be a static machine gun, an MG34, and then the guy directing fire, and then there's a mine clearing team. I've obviously got a bloke with the little wand there. And then I've got a fella who I'm going to stick. This is a Black Tree Design figure. Now, Black Tree Design's World War II range is excellent. This is slightly later period, so he's got the kind of rubber helmet band, but he's got a little spade there, as you can see. He looks a bit vigorous for a guy digging up a mine, but I needed something that looked kind of like it'd fit. But he'll kneel rather, kind of towards the front there, just to add some visual interest again, as part of a mine clearance team. So there's that, and then that's it really. That's what's on the table for now. I just wanted to kind of show you where we are, and then in the future, obviously, we'll have to come around and get some some heavy work done. But if I give you one tip for blokes with shields, is get yourself a 2-part epoxy resin glue type thing. What I do when I assemble them is I use my tub of basing sand, kind of like, if you imagine this is full of sand. What I do is I put the figure together, and then I embed the unpainted figure in the sand at the angle so that the shield doesn't tip over. So that's a top tip on how to make sure that the shields stay put the way you want them to. That's my top tip for this video. So that's what's on the docket at the moment. There's obviously other stuff as well, like Franco-Prussian War stuff. There's always stuff going on here, like in the hobby room. I'm never bored, and I'm never look here and think to myself, oh, I don't know what to do. I've always got something to do of various levels of interest for myself, right? So I can never come in here and be like, oh, there's nothing to do. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to do nothing. I've always got something to do. So I know that it must be quite frustrating watching somebody like me who's quite butterfly-ish by nature, but just rest assured, this variety is what keeps me interested. If you told me all you can do is paint nothing but Crimean figures, I would just not do anything, because I get bored. I'd say bored, but I get frustrated with monotony, and so life is monotonous enough. We don't need to bring it into our hobby as well. Now, on the other hand, as I've said in the past, if I had a goal to paint to, and I knew I had to get something done by a certain date, that would be a different story, but I don't, so I get to do what I want. So that's everything that's on the table right now. There's a few more bits and pieces I want to show you. What I'll do is I will show you the painted stuff, and then a few more bits and pieces. Some book stuff. We'll finish with the painted stuff at the end, I think, because I'll need to set up things a little bit different for that. But we'll look at some books now, or magazines right now. Alright, so we're swiftly coming towards the end of the video, and just wanted to share with you Volume 7, Number 9, Wargamers Digest, July 1980. So, I think the lesson I've learned recently is that there's nothing new under the sun. And so, what that tells me is that, in the end, we like to think of, the period that we live in today as being unique, or that everything is novel or whatever. But the same debates come up again and again. And so, a while back, I showed you the Skirmish Wargaming article, and so this Wargames Digest, I wanted to show you this article, which is the advantages of 15mm figures. So, I've got to be honest here. My understanding historically of wargaming was that we started with small figures and then slowly moved our way up. So in my head, 15mm was the kind of de facto size, right? And then over time, things have gotten either smaller or bigger. So 6mm came about because people wanted larger battles that look amazing. and then in my head also the 28 mil, 25 turned into 28, turned into 30, turned into 35. Like everything just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But the interesting thing here is the this article would suggest that 25 mil was popular before 15 mil. But there's this interesting bit here, so I want to just read this to you. It says here, miniature wargaming is a hobby of growth and change, back then as it is today, right? To keep pace, the leading manufacturers are producing new and improved products as they compete for the hobby dollar. One of the newest trends has been towards smaller wargaming figures, as more gamers are switching from tactical to grand tactical rules. These changing trends in relationship to Napoleonic wargaming are particularly exciting. Over the years, wargaming miniatures have been steadily shrinking. 54mm figures were replaced by 30mm figures, which in turn gave way to the very popular 25mm miniatures. Today, the 15mm figure is increasing in popularity. And there are three basic reasons why this occurred, and they are widely accepted by participating gamers: less cost, little space, and increased quality. So then it goes on and it talks about all the monetary benefits of using smaller scale figures. Now, I didn't know that 54mm was the kind of original OG scale, so to speak, and then that 30mm was an interstitial range before getting to 25s and then down to 15s. It seems that in our current day we are in the upward swing, and thus the pendulum continues. So again, as I was reading through this old magazine, I came across this lovely little nugget of history, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. I think it's so funny because we get so worked up about scales, God's own scale, and what's the best scale, and why is this scale better than that scale. And I think the only thing that's constant is the lack of constancy in this particular arena. And so, like, today we're spoiled for choice, right? I've seen people 3D printing things in more kind of large scales, 54mm sizes now. I think specifically the Red Scorpion figures, which would to me imply that there's a growing appetite for larger figures, probably more in line with a skirmish type game. So yes, things change, but they also seem to simply just sort of revert back to where they were. So that was just a quick little excursion to a magazine in the 1980s, which proves to us all that we're all basically just repeating history over and over and over. And then the final thing in terms of books and such that I wanted to talk about before I show you finished figures is, so I've shown you the Cape Wars books. Those were obviously the first things I wanted to show you. I was in Austin a few weeks ago for work and with one of my colleagues, and we finished up early on the last day of our time there. Before we went to the airport, we were like, you know what, we could just go and sit at the airport, or, and he suggested this, we could go to a half-price books. Now, I've never been to half-price books before because I live in the West Coast and we don't have that here. But I know that Corvinus Wargaming is a fan because he's talked about half-price books a few times. Now, my understanding is that it's more of a Midwestern thing, but there are a few half-price books in Texas, and amongst those, there are some, or one, or whatever, in Austin. So what I did was I picked up a couple of books while we were there. My eyes were bigger than my tummy, so to speak, but I managed to kind of show some restraint. So I'll start with the first book which caught my eye, which was a very new copy of The Komneni Dynasty by John Carr, Byzantium Struggle for Survival, 1057 to 1185. I've read the first chapter of this book, which is all about Anna Komnene. Komnenos is the surname if you're male, but Komneni if you're female. And it's a lovely book. So I'm at chapter 2 right now. I haven't finished the book yet, so I can't speak to how great it is, except that I really enjoyed the opening chapter. And then I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. Brand new, by pen and sword. You can still see the registration pamphlet is in there, but it's a lovely book. I think it even does a little final addendum about the sort of successor kingdom in Trebizond, which was run by the Komnenos dynasty. But anyway, So I got this. My wife is obviously a Greek and also a scholar of all things Byzantine, and so I thought it was something that we could both enjoy. So hopefully when I'm done with it, she can also have a read. Then the other book I got was The Mughal Empire by John F. Richards. I don't know if this is any good. I had a flick through it. It was quite interesting just based on the chapter. It's a new Cambridge history of India, and I thought it looked quite interesting to me. I thought the chapter headings looked pretty good. There's a lovely dedication there to his mother, Ella Higgins Richards. Always nice to see that. But yeah, it covers all this. But there's really interesting things about the economy, societal change, and international trade. One of the things I'm interested in about the Mughals is I heard this really cool statistic, which is that at the height of the Mughal Empire, the Mughal Empire accounted for 25% of the world's GDP, which is mental, absolutely mental. But India was just so absolutely fabulously wealthy. So I picked this up and I figured, you know what, I would like to read a bit about the Mughals, right? I find it interesting, this piece of art where it has almost like a halo figure around the head of the Mughal Shah. So I thought, might as well have a read of this, see how I get on. I'm not sure if it's any good. I'll let you know when I'm done. If you've read it before and you think it's absolute rubbish and I should get rid of it, just let me know. And then I picked up this book as well, which is about Nadir Shah, the Sword of Persia, and From Tribal Warrior to Conquering Tyrant. So he is a follow-up to the Safavid Empire, who is from Afghanistan. I forget what the dynasty is called, but something with an H. He was basically the boss of Persia in the 18th century. So really interesting kind of interlude in Persian history where you have this Afghan dynasty that steps in for a period of time, and really represents probably the end of the Safavid tradition. And then I think they get replaced by the Qajars, but again, my knowledge of Persian history isn't great. So I picked this up. Interesting guy, Nadir Shah. I've watched a few videos online about him, and I thought, you know what, why not grab a book and read. So as I said, with this winter coming up, being away from my figures to a large extent and not having access to everything I want, I'm probably going to have to spend more time reading and stuff. So I thought there's nothing wrong with having a couple of books to power through. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, didn't you say you'd rather get books from the library? Yes, absolutely. But as I've said in the past, stuff like this is sometimes very hard to get hold of. But there's another limitation there. If it's an Osprey book or something like that, it's fine. It's a couple of pages. I can smash through it in a weekend by just casually flicking through it. The challenge I've had with books on interlibrary loan is I've struggled to finish them in time because they obviously have to get back to wherever they're from. And I was just like, there have been a few cases where I've got a really good book from interlibrary loan and I've renewed it as many times as I can, but eventually it has to go back and I've just not been able to get through it, mainly because I've been on the road so much. And you might think, oh, well, being on the road should be a great opportunity to read, but I will say this, when you get up at like 3 a.m. to catch a 5 a.m. flight, and you spend all day on a plane, and then when you land at your final destination, you just want to collapse into a heap because you've not slept well the night before because you got up at 3 a.m. and B, you couldn't fall asleep because you knew you were flying and you had to get up at 3 a.m. when you bundle all of that together, and then you've got to get up at like 6 a.m. Eastern Coast time when you're used to Pacific time, so that's a 3-hour time difference. Again, that's 6 a.m. is your 3 a.m., so your body clock just goes into like terminal decline. So I don't really get a lot of time to sort of to myself, or not just to myself, but also I don't get a lot of time to do the things I want, and I don't really have the level of focus that I would like. So when I travel for work, I typically spend most of my time, if I do have any downtime, I'll watch something on Amazon Prime or Netflix or whatever it is that we have access to at the time. Because I can more passively engage with it, but I can't do the same with reading. My brain just switches off basically, and I tune out. So I kind of know my own weaknesses at this point. I've had to live with them for long enough. One thing, so this is Michael Axworthy's book. One thing that caught my eye is this name. Quote, the best biography of the year, Simon Sebag Montefiore. Now, I am a subscriber to the Economist podcast, Economist Plus podcast thing. And one of the producers on their shows is a woman called Poppy Sebag Montefiore. And Sebag Montefiore is not a very common name, so I am slightly curious if they are related. So I may have to do a bit of digging on that front. But anyway, wanted to read this book. I've kind of a bit of a kick at the moment when it comes to Near Eastern stuff. I think this road ultimately leads to a 15 millimeter Khorasan sort of Safavid army / Akakuyunlu / Ottoman armies, you know, just getting into that whole region. So I think Corvinus Wargaming, you have a lot to answer for. My wallet will not thank you, sir. So anyway, there's that. Those are the books, and now we'll do some figures that I've done this month. Again, not a lot to show, but I'll show you what I have. Okay, so we've got the last two of my American Civil War command stands, infantry stands from Essex. As you know, I've been grinding my way through those. I really enjoyed painting these figures, actually, so I don't want it to sound like it was misery. I just went for very standard colours, except for the drummer on the far right, who I did in a sort of butternuts, just to kind of make things a bit more interesting. The figures come with cast-on flags. I've just painted them blue. I'm just guessing they are sort of Bonnie Blue flags or something. I've not tried to be too clever because I do not have the skill to paint a folded up flag. So they are what they are, and they'll stay that way forever. So they are now done. Very happy with the way they turned out. The figures from Essex, I mean, they're obviously a little bit older, but they are really nice. So definitely my kind of style when it comes to 15mm. Easy to paint. No major dramas. So yeah, I was quite chuffed to get that done. So that's one less thing to worry about moving forward. So that is now all the infantry from Essex done, and now I have a bunch of cavalry to do and some limbers and stuff. I've done my guns, which I showed a while back, so I have an absolute bucket load of cavalry to do, and I'm not looking forward to it because I hate painting horses. So anyway, there's that. And then next up, I've got some French Ordnance figures. So these are 15mm Essex figures from a French Ordnance army pack that I bought 20 odd years ago. The figures are lovely. My inspiration for painting them was a website called Army Royale, which I will link in the description. I don't know much about the Valois Dynasty French army. I wasn't able to find too much info, so I just used his website as a kind of crib notes. He uses a lot of sort of tapestries and paintings and such for his to guide his hand, so I've just done the same. I've just literally cribbed his notes. The way you know they're French is because the guys who have jerkins have got little crosses of Saint-Denis, white crosses on their chests and their backs potentially. The gun I've kept generic so they can do duty in basically any kind of era army. I was a bit annoyed by the poses of the crew. They both seem to be trying to work at the same time, which is not going to happen. So I've just stuck them on as they are. I'm not too worried about the kind of the coordination on that. It's fine. I just got like one base of sort of gendarme done, another of more kind of medium cavalry, if you will, and then the gun. I've gone for a slightly more foliage heavy base. I've just put little bushes and such just to create some visual interest. This is not a priority army for me, but it was again one of those, like, I was in the mood for painting something like this. I just grabbed it and got it done. It took like an evening to do each base, so it wasn't too bad. The horses, of course, were usually, as is usually the case, were just the absolute nightmare for me. I really hate painting horses. It's just one of those things. The lances, I've opted for a kind of ashwood colour, sort of beige lance. My reasoning is that a lance is a consumable item. I guess if you're doing jousts and such, you may want colourful, interesting looking lances, but from a combat perspective, I don't see any reason why you would bother painting them if they are going to shatter when used. So I've gone for the more kind of wooden colour. And then colour palette is, I've tried to keep it kind of reds, yellows, blues, not too kind of off the walls, again in line with what I've seen on the Army Royale website. So I'm pretty chuffed with how they came out. The figure on the far left here is actually a mounted bowman who was included as part of the pack. So he's got a bow quiver on his right hip, which I've just painted brownish as like a leather, and then he came with a lance, so I had to do a little bit of excavation to fit it through his arm loop. So you wouldn't know unless I told you, I think, but he's actually a mounted archer, and so now he is doing duty as a medium cavalryman in the French army. So it looks really cool, I think. Pretty happy with how they turned out. And then we've got some more Numidian horsemen. So earlier I mentioned this idea of doing the tunics as sort of mainly white with a bit of variance and a few smudges of colour in it. You would have seen that in the infantry I've done so far, and again I've done the same here. So I've done a red tunic which I've faded out into a sort of pinkish colour, like a madder red, and then a blue one, which you can see on the far right there, which is similarly just meant to be a kind of faded blue. That, you know, the assumption being that this guy has picked up a slightly nicer, more interesting coloured tunic while he's on campaign, but of course these things fade with the weather. So yep, there's more Numidians done. The shields I didn't try to be too clever this time. I did some oxhide patterns, I did a hippo skin grey, and then I did a little horse pattern there, which seems to have been pretty common. Actually, when I was in Catalonia, I found a really cool museum in, I forget where we were now, it was Barcelona, archaeological museum, which had some really cool Punic stuff, so that was quite inspiring in terms of like objets d'art, in terms of how they influenced Punic styles and such. The Numidians seem to have been a very interesting culture, influenced by both Hellenistic influences from the east, obviously Latin influences from Rome later on, and then of course the Punic influence at the front end before the Second Punic War. Okay, that's that done. Let's remove them quickly. And then finally I did a sandbag emplacement. This will be used for World War II, that kind of thing. A while back I had this idea that I'd like to do bits of terrain interspersed with painting figures, and this was just one of those things where I could quickly throw together a little piece of terrain, get it done, and say it is complete. And so I did a sandbag emplacement, which I can use with my World War II stuff or whatever. So again, not a particularly amazing piece. It's a little resin cast from Warlord Games. It does the trick, does what it says on the box. Pretty happy with that. And that's it. At this point, let's... Alright, so I guess at this point I should probably say thank you for watching. It's been a long video. Apologies for that, for those who don't like them that long. What I'll say is I'll leave you with this picture of these Numidians. I think we will probably end up taking the 15mm stuff with us. I still have a boatload of Numidian cavalry to do. I've got more Carthaginian stuff to do. I've got lots of Republican Roman, Middle Republican Roman stuff to do. 15mm is definitely something that I can get done on the road while I'm away from home. So I'm probably going to go for that, in all honesty. I can travel relatively light without taking everything with me. I don't need all the colours in the world. I can get by with what I have in a relatively limited palette. So the plan, I think, is to take the 15mm stuff. I think that's what makes sense, right? If you have any thoughts, let me know. I'll be packing up this week. I'll be in New York City, and then when I get back, I'll pack up and I'll be on the road going to Texas over about a 2-3 day drive. So let me know if you have any ideas or thoughts. But yeah, certainly 15mm looks like the likely pick at the moment for what's going on the road with me and what'll be the focus for now until January when I get back home again. So yeah, just wanted to leave you with that. Take care, and I am always watching the videos, even if I don't always provide comment. I do appreciate the various comments and videos that people are putting out there. So thank you for watching, and take care.